Good morning and welcome to Convocation. We have a number of announcements for this morning, so I'll invite those folks to come on up, introduce themselves, and share their news.
Hey everyone, SJ elections are coming up for senator, so if you're interested, you need to fill out a form first. This form is due April 18th in the Student Life office. Please give it to Jamila by 3 p.m. Thank you.
Could I have the survey slide up? The campus safety survey slide up? Thank you. So I'm here on behalf of SGA. We have sent out a survey in partnership with BCCJP to assess people's opinions on police on campus and campus safety. We are wanting to get as many people as possible to fill this out. It was sent out in email at about 10:10 this morning by the SGA. So if you can find that, you can fill that out via the link or use the QR code. But yeah, fill it out. We need people to fill it out. So get your friends to fill it out. If you care, fill it out. If you don't care, fill it out. You get the idea. Thank you.
Can I get the Bubbert slide up, please? Alrighty, here's another reminder for the Bubberts Film Festival that we have every year. The date is set for May 9th. I'll make sure to get that on the slide for next time. But please start working on some videos to submit for SAC. We, as you see the prizes for each one is some pretty high dollar prizes if you can make the best video. It's one of our bigger events that we have that a lot of people usually dress up for. We'll have desserts. So please keep this in mind and keep on making those hilarious videos. Thank you so much.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Micah. I'm the editor-in-chief of the Collegian. Every year, the Collegian selects a Thresher of the Year. This is somebody who we think has exemplified what it means to be a Thresher. So by creating community, being kind, just being kind of generally great to have on campus. This can be faculty, students, or staff. So if there's somebody who you think has been really exceptional this past year in anything, this morning Melanie Zerker sent out a survey. It includes a spot for you to nominate somebody and then somewhere to include your reasons for doing so. It'll take literally like 30 seconds to just put somebody's name down and maybe one reason, and they might win Thresher of the Year and get recognized for being a good member of our community. So if you're able, please fill that out, give us some feedback, and then we will announce next week sometime. The survey closes on Friday, who the winner is going to be. Thank you.
Can I get the Mud Slam poster up? Thank you. My name is Josiah Buller. I'm representing Student Alumni Association. It is our annual Mud Slam tournament. It's coming up here at the end of April. If you don't know what it is literally just volleyball in the mud. So the Mud Slam pits are out by the softball field. We will add a bunch of water to it, get super muddy, a lot of fun. Sign up. The sign-up link should be going out here in a little bit today, so look for that in your emails. You can have a team up to 9 members. You'll play 2 games, 2 10-minute games. There'll be food. The Parents Association will be grilling hamburgers and hot dogs, I think, so there'll be food. So come on out. It's at 12 p.m. April 27th, so come on out. It's a great time. Just come out, enjoy the evening, even if you don't want to play. It's a lot of fun just to watch people dive in, slip in, and fall in mud. So thank you.
In this morning's convocation, we will have the presentation of the second of 3 alumni awards. This one, the Outstanding Alumnus Award. And we want to extend a very special welcome to all of the guests who are joining us for convocation today. It is yet another testament to the impact that George Rogers has had on our community here at Bethel and beyond. So a very warm welcome to all of you. Thank you so much for being here to celebrate. And as we begin our presentation for this morning, I will invite up Brad Schmidt from the Alumni Office.
Good morning. Good morning. Each year, the Bethel College Alumni Association honors selected alumni with awards in 3 categories. Last week, we awarded Jarrell Williams with our Young Alumnus Award. On April 21, we will honor 1982 alumna Carolyn Kuhn with our Distinguished Achievement Award. And this morning, we have gathered to honor our Outstanding Alumnus Award winner. The Outstanding Alumnus Award recognizes character, service to church, community, or college, and other outstanding achievements, honors, and recognition. At this time, I'll call on 2007 Bethel graduate and chair of the Alumni Association Awards Committee, Brad Coleman, to introduce this year's recipient, as well as the person giving the citation honoring our award winner. Brad.
This morning, Bethel College is pleased to recognize 1969 graduate George Rogers for his many years of dedication and outstanding service to Bethel College and the greater community. George, your influence on Bethel College cannot be overstated. After graduating from Bethel, George stuck around, and he supported and guided and led Bethel College students for over 20 years as the head track coach and athletic director, while also serving as an assistant football coach. After earning his master's degree, George stepped into another influential leadership position at the college, Dean of Students, which he served for another 8 years. After his employment was through here at Bethel, George served on the Bethel College Board of Directors. Bethel College has been forever changed by your leadership because of your work. And for that, George, myself, and the Bethel College Alumni Awards Committee is forever grateful. Congratulations, George. At this time, I'd like to call Bethel College Board Chair Wynn Gehring on stage to read the citation. Wynn.
Thank you, Brad. George Jolly Rogers is well known to generations of Bethel supporters for his athletic achievements. Excelling as a player, coach, and administrator, he was inducted into the Thresher Athletic Hall of Fame in 2005. But this is only a part, and perhaps not the most important part, of the impact he has had on his alma mater and adopted community. It is as if the NBA star Bill Bradley were only known as a former basketball player and not for his 3 terms in the United States Senate. George Rogers was recruited to Bethel in 1967 from what was then Woodrow Wilson Junior College in Chicago to play football, and it was in athletics he first made his mark. Shortly after his graduation, he was named head track coach, and in the space of 10 years built a varsity track program that dominated the Kansas Athletic Conference. Coaching both men's and women's track, he was named KCAC Coach of the Year in 1974, 1975, and 1979. And also in 1975, at the age of 28, the NAIA District 10 Coach of the Year, the NAIA Area 3 Coach of the Year, and one of 8 finalists for the NAIA National Coach of the Year. At the same time, George was steadily accumulating other significant duties and responsibilities at the college. After completing his master's degree at Wichita State in 1972, he joined Bethel's physical education faculty and rose to the rank of associate professor. He was appointed athletic director in 1971, and in that role was recognized as the NAIA District 10 Administrator of the Year in 1990. He coached football continuously from the fall of 1969 through 1991. In 1991, George assumed the duties of Dean of Students, today's Vice President for Student Affairs, a position he filled under 2 Bethel presidents. As a member of the Executive Cabinet, he was responsible for all aspects of student and residents' life. In the fall of 1998, George was recruited again this time to join the minority-owned construction firm of his friend and fellow Bethel alumnus, Earl White. He worked at White Wing Construction as its chief operating officer until his retirement in 2011. In the midst of these labor-intensive professions, George found time to give leadership to many other parts of his community. George worked part-time at Youthville, now Ember Hope, in capacities of counselor and instructor throughout the 1970s. In 1972, he was appointed to Newton's Substance Abuse Board, and ever since has been a sought-after member of behavioral health boards and commissions. George has served for 6 years on the board of Meadowlark Homestead, 10 years on the board of Prairie View, and continuously on the board of Mirror Inc. since his initial appointment in 1996. Other area institutions have also tasked George's wisdom and judgment. Asked to run for the Newton School Board in 1987, he was elected twice and served 2 years as its chairman. He has also served for 15 years on the 9th Judicial District Nominating Commission and 12 years on the Bethel College Board of Directors, including 10 years on its executive committee. Inevitably, as a black man living in an overwhelmingly white area of the country, George has experienced many firsts in his personal and professional life. Those who know him appreciate the unassuming way he has approached the challenges that come with that distinction. Those who know him well know how serious he has been about those challenges. He is a long-standing member of the Wichita Alumni Chapter of Kappa Alpha Psi, one of the oldest and most prestigious black fraternities in the nation, whose activities include everything from feeding the homeless to providing college scholarships to promoting public health. And we are honored to have several of George's fraternity brothers in the audience today. George married Rita Gour, an alumna of the Bethel Deaconess Nursing Program, in 1976. They have 2 children, Tara and Brett. Tara passed away in 2021 of complications from lupus. George and Rita remain an active presence in the lives of Tara's children, Adrian and Alyssa, and Brett's daughters, Amelia and Evelyn. Democracy, it has been said, is made possible by those who show up. Time and again, George Rogers has shown up when asked to lead and serve his family, college, and community. I believe his legacy is distinctive and unrivaled in our school's history. He richly deserves to be honored with Bethel's Outstanding Alumnus Award. Thank you.
Thank you, Wynn. I now invite George, Brad Schmidt, and Bethel College President John Gehring to join on stage. George, the Bethel College Alumni Association is pleased to honor you with this year's Outstanding Alumnus Award. Brad, will you please present the plaque?
I'll read this aloud. The Outstanding Alumnus Award is conferred upon George Rogers for many years of dedication and outstanding service to Bethel College and the local community.
We decided to do a conversation this morning instead of having George give a speech because we didn't trust him unfiltered for 25 minutes. I'd like to start our time this morning by acknowledging members of George's family in attendance today. All the way from Chicago, Illinois, George's sister Patricia and her husband Sam Garner are here with their daughter Cetrice and her son Shelby. George's granddaughter, Alyssa Rogers, is here. And of course, the real star of the show, George's spouse, Rita Rogers. Welcome to all of you, and we're so pleased to have you here today. Then for my part, I think I should begin by noting that over the years, I've had a number of chances to say nice things about George Rogers. With this morning's citation, I am now officially out of nice things to say about George Rogers. There's none left. So this will be a chance for him to set the record straight, if you will. So George, I know that Convocation was a place you tried hard to avoid when you were a student. How's it feel to be back here after all these years?
Reminds me of the first, one of the first convos I went to. There was this guy, I don't remember his name, that's not important, but he was talking about a Kierkegaard. And most of you might know that, since you're all good scholars of the church, that he was one of the first people to talk about existentialism. And this guy obviously had been a contemporary of Kierkegaard, who died in 1855. And he droned on for 55 minutes about Kierkegaard. And I thought to myself, now, I've been working all week trying to be nice and not use my two favorite words, but I thought to myself, my God, I can't ever go back there again. Because, you know, I don't sleep in the daytime. I'm just one of those people who never takes a nap in the daylight. But he about bored me to death. And I went to the dean and I told him, I said, I can't go back there no more. And he was very understanding, because he had tried to recruit me for 2 years to come down here to go to school. And I said to myself, I said, I can't. I said, if I flunk out or don't ever graduate, it's okay. But I'm not going back to Convocation again. In those days, Convocation was sort of like catechism. I mean, you know, they was training you to be something. And I've never been known as a real religious person. I'm a moralist, more or less. I know right from wrong. That's all I needed to know. I don't need to know how the Methodists did it or whoever. I don't need to know that. I was a bedside Baptist by choice. And then when I came down here, I learned to be a mattress Mennonite. And so I just never kind of liked church. And part of it, most of you, some of you will know what the Black Baptist Church is like. Now, I tell you what, in 1952, when my mom made us go every time, I was 5 years old. And you go there, and they would, you know, the choir would come in, they'd march in, and they'd sing. Then the pastor would come out there, and they'd pass the plate and all that. And this sucker, I'm 5 years old. And this sucker would start preaching. And he would, after 45 to 50 minutes, he was just clearing his throat. And I said, my God, I'm 5 years old. I'm 5 now, remember that. But then what got me the most was I was, at 5 years old, I believed what the pastor said. And when he would start talking about hell's fire damnation and all that stuff and how your soul is going to burn in hell, my eyes got that big. And you sitting there listening to this, and you thinking, I can't be good. I'm going to burn in hell. My mom taught us every week that we couldn't be good, because my brother, who's older than I am, he kept us in trouble because he just believed that, you know, and that the butt whoopings we were getting were that effective. And then he always got it first, but I watched him. I learned a lot by watching over the years. He would try to buck up and wouldn't cry. And my mom would quit spanking him when he cried. Well, he'd be bucking up and he'd be taking those little swats on the behind. And finally he'd cry, she quit. She just looked at me and I learned that, you know, early on in life, that, you know, cry fast because the lady will back off. So you know, like I said, they prayed all the devil out of me when I was at 5 years old. So I never had reason to go back to church. So I just, you know, it was gone. Because that man talked about hell's fire damnation, and I was through. I don't need you no more now. I know right from wrong. I'll be good. Kind of good. Okay.
So no more questions about Kierkegaard or religion. Got it.
Thank you.
Let's start with some other stories about growing up on the south side of Chicago, near 42nd and Cottage Grove. Your parents were part of the Great Migration, that big movement of black people from the Jim Crow South to the industrial Midwest and North in search of better jobs and better lives. Tell us a little bit about how they got to Chicago.
Well, my dad, both of my parents are from Alabama. My dad is from a little town down south of Tuskegee called Garreton. My mom was from Birmingham. But my dad went to, he's one of 12 kids. And, you know, they needed all those kids to do all that picking cotton and stuff like that they did down there during those times. And he said he couldn't take it. He just wanted to get out. So he went to Birmingham, and one of his older sisters was living there, and he went to work in the coal mine. And he worked there for a couple of years, and he didn't particularly like the coal mine. So he had some older siblings that had moved up to Gary, Indiana, to work in the steel mill. So he migrated on up to Chicago to Gary, Indiana, to work in the steel mill, and he got burnt, and something happened. I don't know. He wouldn't talk about it too much, but so then he went to Chicago and started doing some things, and finally, I'll get to that part later. But then my mom, my mom's mom, my grandmother, we had gotten married when she was 15 years old, and she had 3 children. And my grandfather was sort of a mean person. And I think he tried to hit her one time, and she took the skillet to him. And she left him, and they moved. Her father had moved, my great-grandfather had moved to Cairo, Illinois, which is way at the very south of Illinois, right on where the point of the state comes. And he had moved there because he had gotten in trouble in Birmingham. The word was that he had killed a white man and they was looking for him. And so he took off and they moved up there and they lived in Cairo for several years. And then I think my grandfather died and they moved to Chicago, where my mother's sister, older sister, was living. And my mother, the father met there. My mother graduated from high school in Chicago, and my father never got out of 6th grade.
I know your parents had very definite views of the part of the country they left. And so when you would go down there to visit relatives, you told me they always gave you instructions. What'd they tell you and your 2 siblings?
Well, I was the one that they was worried about most because my tongue wasn't exactly controlled. And I remember we went down in 1956. It was the year after Emmett Till had been killed down in Mississippi. But we went, and my mom couldn't go. She wasn't feeling well or something. So she told me before we left, said, now you keep your mouth shut. Said, I'd like to see you again. And if you go down there and you act a fool, they're going to fix you right up. And I said, okay. And you know, knowing that I probably wouldn't be good, but knowing my dad would keep me out of trouble. So the part of the story that really made me shut up as I came back home was that we were on the way back and we were coming through Tennessee. And in those days, every road was 2 lanes just about. That was very few 4-lane roads. And we were coming around Lookout Mountain, Tennessee, and somebody came around the curve and they swung out in our lane, and my dad turned real sharp, hit the mountain, turned the car on the side. And I hurt my back a little bit, so they took us to the hospital, and we're sitting in the waiting room waiting, you know, and highway patrolmen, some big guys, come in with a white man. And this guy had knots on his head, and the knot, where they beat him with the baton. And he was so beat up, and I'm sitting there looking at that, and I'm thinking, they beat up a white man. And so finally the doctor got around to asking, because I told him what was wrong with me. I was hurt, my back was hurt. And he looked at me and said, "You need help?" "I'm fine, thank you." I didn't want to go back there with them guys, so I kind of acted right. That helped. That was one of those things, life lessons that helped to make you learn how to act.
Well, that does relate to an incident I wanted you to talk about, where you were part of a seminal moment in the civil rights movement, but probably didn't know it at the time. It was the summer of 1955 when a 14-year-old black boy named Emmett Till, who was also from Chicago, was in Mississippi visiting his relatives. Some of you know this. On a trip to a drugstore, he said something to a white woman that was perceived to be inappropriate for a black kid talking to a white woman. So her husband and brother-in-law grabbed Till, beat him to death, shot him in the head, and threw his body in the Tallahatchie River, where it was discovered several days later. All of this would not have been headline news in 1955 were it not for Emmett Till's mother, who insisted on having a public funeral with an open casket viewing so everybody could see what had been done to her boy. An estimated 50,000 people filed by that open casket on the corner of Bowen and Cottage Grove, just down the street from your home, and you and your brother were two of them. Tell us about that moment.
Well, one of my mother's sisters married a man from Mississippi, and he was deeply affected by this deal. And he grabbed my brother and I. His kids were really young. Maybe only one was born, maybe not even yet, in 55. But he said, "I want you boys to see what white folks will do to you." And so he grabbed us and he took us around there. In 55, I was 8 years old. And he took us around to the wake. And we stood in line and we walked through and looked at Emmett Till and, in the glass. They had him in a glass enclosed. And the mom wouldn't let him they wouldn't let him try to fix him because he was really beat up. I mean, if you ever see any of those pictures, you'll think, my God, how inhumane is that? And we had to see that because he wanted us to see it. He wanted us to know about the inhumane treatment that people can treat, how inhumane people can treat you. So we walked through there and saw it. I mean, it left an impression on me. And it took me a long time to actually overcome that. I dreamt about it for a long time. And even still now, I think about it every time I see one of those Emmett Till narratives or something. But because he was sort of a kid like me. I saw him when I saw those movies. Even now, in retrospect, I said, that's how I used to be.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't whistle at anybody. But
well, before we leave your childhood, I think we should note it wasn't all tragedy and suffering. Tell us about how you and your friends invented an urban version of Ultimate Frisbee. I think you called it something else.
We called it Cell Cat. What we would do is we would go around in the alleys and we would look for cats that had been run over. And by time, it's similar to what kids down here on the farm did when they threw cow chips. We would go in the alleys and somebody would run over a cat and they'd run over it several times and flatten it out pretty good. And we would pick up that cat and we would try to see who could throw it the farthest. And we called it Cell Cat. Now, in those days, you could get a Frisbee at a gas station that was giving them out when you bought gas or something as a promotion thing. But they didn't do that a lot in our neighborhood. So we made our own Frisbee. You know, we called it Cellcat.
So when our friends at Heston College brag about their achievements in ultimate Frisbee, we want them all to know that they really have you to thank for
Yeah, and you have to get the right
popularizing the
size
sport,
cat.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
one too long is just, a dog is too big. but a cat is the right size and the right weight.
Too much detail, George. Too much detail. You went to what today we would think of as a charter school, Tilden Technical, with emphases in math and science. You often talk about being raised by strong women, your mother and your grandmother. But when you graduated, your father played a key role in eventually getting you to go to college. Tell us how that came about.
Well, because I had a January birthday, we started in Chicago, you started school, they started kindergartners twice a year, in January and in September. And so I started in January because my birthday was early enough in January that when the classes started for kindergartners, I went. But when I graduated it then in 1965 in January, my dad had started at Christmas telling me, he said, now you got a choice. You can either go to school or go to work. I said, okay. And I knew he was serious because my dad didn't joke a lot like that. So so here comes the graduation day. It was on a Friday night. Went through the graduation, and he didn't say anything on Saturday or Sunday because he knew he couldn't. No place would be open. Monday morning, he worked 11 to 7. He got off early and came home, and he got me up at 6 o'clock. Let's go, boy. So he took me down to the CTA, which is the Transit Authority in Chicago, and he said, I want this boy to have a job. And so.
And he'd worked there for 20 years already,
Yeah,
right?
he'd
For a long
worked
time,
there
yeah.
as a welder on the line when they welded frogs and things like frogs are where the tracks, where the switches are, where the switch from one set of tracks over to another. But they wouldn't hire me because I was, I wasn't a big guy like I am now. I was a semi-big guy. I weighed about 215 pounds, and I was in good shape. Just finished wrestling, and playing football and doing all that stuff. But they had these strict weight limits, and it disappointed my dad to no end. So he left me alone for a day. But in the meantime, I'm talking to my buddy Mike Burnett, who also went to school down here. And his dad said, he worked at U.S. Steel. His dad says, well, come on out to the steel mill. They don't worry about your weight. They worry about whether you can take the heat. And so I went out there. He said, you come out there Wednesday and I'll talk to somebody and we'll get the job. Went out there Wednesday, got a job working in Open Hearth. And oh man, that was experience. You talking about hot. That's why I don't worry about religion too much. I've been in hell. And I shovel stuff in there. I mean, because that's what you do. You shovel stuff into the Open Hearth. It just depends. But I went to work and he was happy because he had told me that we're breaking your plate when you graduate. You're done eating here. You have to get out.
And 6 months of that convinced you that maybe college wasn't such a bad option, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I was first in line.
So then you went to Woodrow Wilson, which is now Kennedy King,
yeah.
A couple miles south of where you grew up. Played football there and did well. You had a team with a lot of talent on it, and I know you were recruited to more than one place. But Bethel came up. Tell us how Bethel College recruited you. And administrators, pay attention to this.
Well, in 1966, Escalon and what's that name?
Otto Unruh.
And no, it wasn't Otto yet.
Oh, did Elmire?
Elmire, yeah, Elmire.
So this is the Dean of Students and the Vice President for Student Affairs.
They showed up in Chicago, and how they showed up was a girl who we knew, whose mom was from Newton, and she had came to Bethel too. And so they came and called us and talked to Mike, my friend Mike and me. And I was having a good time at JUCO, and we were winning, and we had a great team. And so Mike came down here in '66, but ESCO came back in '67 when I was sophomore and I was graduating from JUCO with an AA degree. Excuse me. And ESCO, I really liked those old guys. You know, Otto Unruh was an old man. He was, at the time, they had this rule that you could only teach a coach till you were 70. And he was already 68, but he was my kind of old man. He was salty. I like salty old men, you know. And ESCO was a reverend. You know, he was a reverend guy, but he was friendly, and I really liked him too. And but they came up to see me in '67, and I knew I wasn't going anywhere because I was too short. You know, to be a big university player, you got to be 6'5" at minimum. And I'm right now, with all the old age shrinkage, I'm not even 6 foot. I done shrunk to 5'11". And I used to be about 6'1.5", you know, and that shows you how much you can go. I guess the mass just wears you out, you know, your spine can't take it. But I just shrunk down, and here I am, you know. But those guys came up and talked to me, and I said, yeah, you know. And I came down to visit. I came to the Buffalo Barbecue, and that was when Bart Starr was here. And the guys made me feel welcome, and we you know, had a good time. And I said, yeah, that's good enough. I mean, it didn't even bother me that they hadn't won a game and this Hector was a pup. But I came anyhow. And and even that first year, we won a couple of games. And even the second year, I only had 2 years because I transferred and had already played. But we won a couple of games, and it started a turnaround. Then I started coaching, and then they saw the real George Rogers then.
So what was Bethel like when you were a student? How did you experience that?
Well, it was different, you know. It's not like it is now. When I come out here now, you know, I go through a door or see kids walking on the grass or on the sidewalk or something. They speak to you. In those days, when I first came down, people would, especially girls, they would try their best to be invisible. They'd walk by you, and you could just tell they just didn't want any contact with anybody. And they'd be walking and trying to be invisible, and I would try to make them visible. I would always speak to them. Good morning. How you doing? And it was always interesting how they responded, because they responded well because we had, you know, somebody spoke to them and actually acknowledged them. It would make their day, you know, in a sense, like they would get this smile and say, well, hello, you know, and so I like that kind of stuff. But I even though I was pretty shy, I would speak to people because, you know, in a southern neighborhood, you speak to the adults. No kid has the right not to walk by an adult and don't say hello, good morning, Mr. Brown, or whatever. You spoke to adults. And they would tell your mama if you didn't speak, you know, and then there she come again, you know. I have to put this little story in here that one time my brother and I, we were messing up, and it was always his fault because he was the oldest and he led, and she made him take me around with him because I'm 2 years younger than him. And so she told us that if I have to get on you guys, it's going to take the fire department to get me off. You know what happened. She got us. And my brother always got it first. And she got the spanking his little behind. And he started calling the fire department. Fire department, fire department, help me, help me. And she says, oh, you're going to call the fire department on me, huh? She wore him out. She just looked at me. I said, I don't know nothing about the fire department. So it was like, you know, we got a lot of straightening up. But yeah, that was the way things were.
Can't imagine raising two of you guys, Jolly. That's just mind-blowing.
And he was really bright. I mean, I was bright enough, but he was devilish bright. You know, he was devilish. He would just do stuff.
I did want to get one other story in here from your time growing up in Chicago. Just a couple months ago, you told me a story about how an encounter with a dog catcher
Oh, yeah.
made an impression on you. Changed your life. Go ahead.
I was on the way to school one morning, and as I walked down the street, I saw this little boy, he looked to be about 10 years old. He had been out walking his dog before he went to school. And the dog catchers had stopped, and his dog had run underneath the car, and they was just gonna get his dog and take him from the boy. So I walked up there, and I was a strapping young lad, like I said, and I told him, I said, you guys need to leave this boy alone. And they said, you'll scratch your eyes out. I said, well, I ain't going nowhere. Come on, scratch my eyes out. But they understood that they was in my neighborhood with my people. And so they got their little tails back on the dog catcher mobile and took off. But they just cussed me as they rode down the road. And I smiled at them. And because I didn't want them to take that boy's dog. Because it was the dog was supposed to be on a leash, but he was just letting the dog run. And but I didn't want them to take that boy's dog. And it really, where it made an emphasis on me was that I knew then that if you use your voice and your presence, you could effect change. Because they went on, and they didn't, they just went on because they knew that they were at a disadvantage, and I wasn't going anywhere.
I've heard other people's stories of when they found their voice, but none had a dog catcher in them. So I like that. The citation we read noted all of the volunteer activities you've been involved in, and also, the athletic achievements. Clearly, you were, in your own way, a high-profile person in the area, and I know you stayed at Bethel for a long time, despite the fact that you had lots of offers to do other things. Tell us about some of the jobs you've said no to over the years, not the volunteer ones, the paying ones.
Well, probably one of the ones that's around here, the McPherson College president always wanted me to come. He said, you can quit tomorrow. I have something for you to do tomorrow night. And he told me all the time, he said, I want you to come. He said, I like brains and you got them. And I said, you sure you talking to the right guy? Because I never thought of myself that way, even though I had gone to that Tilden that you talked about, and that was grueling. I mean, that was, if you didn't get a C average your freshman year, they sent you back to the regular high school. So you had to put out academically, and I did, and it surprised me because, I wasn't, almost slipped and said one of those two words.
Doing good. Just a few more minutes.
But McPherson was one of probably the most. And then I always got calls from Wichita State, and then even companies that wanted, black representation. And I knew that people were looking for black people to do things, but I never saw that as a negative. To me, it was a positive because as they used me, I was using them. One of the things I learned in all this stuff that I did was, how do these big corporations work? How does it work to be in the corporate boardrooms? How does it work to be on these high-powered committees and things that folks do, and because you can use it for my own personal gain. I mean, it always helped me whenever I needed to get a loan. I charged right in the bank and I knew what to say. I'd never been turned down for a loan. When I went in, walked in, and they would figure out a way to help me. And because I was I knew what to say. But I learned that by being on these boards and things like that. And I knew I was being used, to be the black, the token black guy to be there. But it was all right. Somebody had to do it, boy, not me. And I was learning something.
Well, just to, got a bunch of other questions, and you've got a bunch of other stories, but just to keep moving along, I'm going to ask you one more, and then maybe we'll have time for a question or two from the audience. In our generation, Jelly, the novelist Kurt Vonnegut was very popular with books like Slaughterhouse-Five and God Bless You, Mr. Rosewater. In that novel, Vonnegut dispensed this advice to newborn twins. "Hello, babies," he wrote. "Welcome to Earth. It's hot in the summer and cold in the winter. It's round and wet and crowded. On the outside, babies, you've got 100 years here. There's only one rule that I know of, babies. God damn it, you've got to be kind." I don't think we've got any babies in attendance this morning, but we do have people with most of their lives still in front of them. If you could leave them with only one rule, what would it be?
Don't be afraid. Attack, you know. Don't never be afraid to present yourself. And you'd be surprised at you know, if you use your head and you present yourself in the right way, that you'll get results. Not every time will you win, but most of the time you'll move up. But you can't be afraid, and always have that smile. A smile will get you a lot of things. You know, it's always amazing.
I'm trying to, because Peter told me to, I'm trying to stay within our time here, and we've got a couple minutes for questions. If there are any questions that don't involve George's 2 words.
To start off, we're going to prioritize student questions first off. Oh yeah, I see you way over there. Hold on.
All right, my name is Caleb. So what was your worst experience as a black man down in the South when you were young?
Well, I never really lived in the South. I only visited down there. So my worst experiences were in Chicago. In Chicago, you know, there's definitive lines of where you go and where you don't go. My dad always said he liked the South for that reason, that you knew, but in a city like Chicago, you never know where you're supposed to go and where you're not supposed to go. You know, you learn it over time, and the other thing, in a city like Chicago, you can just walk right down your own block and run into trouble, or turn a corner and run into trouble. And but I never had bad experiences in the South because they pretty much protected me because they knew who I was. They got me out of there, as a matter of fact, before I could do harm to myself. Yes, back there.
Hi, thank you so much for being here today. I just wanted to ask a question about the Emmett Till thing. I think it was 2007, maybe. Carolyn Brandt had admitted that her accusations were false, that she had lied. Did that change your perspective at all about that experience? About or I guess what was your reaction, kind of?
No, not really, because I'm right now, I forget how old I am, but pretty damn old. I know I can't count it all to my hands and fingers and toes, but it's sort of one of those things you kind of expected. Even in those early times, you knew that wasn't true, that kid had better sense than to do what they claimed he did. And because he wouldn't have got killed in Chicago, but he would have got his face slapped in Chicago, you know. So, and he had better sense than that. But so it didn't surprise me at all that there was that she recanted her story.
Thanks for sharing, George. I appreciated your dog catcher story, and one thing you mentioned in that story is that you knew that you were in your neighborhood, in your community, that sense of being able to use your voice came in part from knowing where you were and that your people, you were surrounded by your people. And I'm curious, knowing what that feels like and knowing who your community is, how did you feel at Bethel? How did that transfer? How did you gain, or did you gain that sense of, I can use my voice here because I know these are my people?
Well, I think I know what you're asking me. I knew that I was at Bethel at first because of guys like these two guys sitting down here. They both played football way back when we had helmets that you could fold up and you know, so they way back in the, you know, the single wing era where, you know, 1-2 and you shift over and all that stuff. But no, but these guys, I was here for them. That was the one reason. Now Harold Schultz worked at me all the time, telling me how if I wanted to go somewhere, it would never work out because I was just jumping out of the frying pan into the fire. But I was here because of these guys, and I did everything I could to protect them. And I fought with a lot of people, went to faculty offices and gave them hell because they was treating these guys, not necessarily these guys. The one I remember, I won't say the faculty member's name, but I went with a girl who was we didn't have women's athletics at the time, but she was offended by something that the teacher did. And it was a little racist, to be real honest. And she wouldn't admit that she ever did anything wrong. But I sure did go with that girl and stand with her, and I kind of told the teacher in front of her that she was wrong. And I thought that's one of the things I did. I even went with some white kids before, to faculty people and who would treat them bad. And I fought faculty in faculty meeting. I mean, I'd raised hell, to be real honest. I don't mind raising hell at all. You ask these guys what happens at halftime sometimes. I mean, I raise hell with anybody because it doesn't scare me. Even during my time here, it never scared me. If they fired me, I knew I could get a job. People wanted me for whatever reason. And I couldn't understand it, but they wanted me. So raise hell with people. But there is one story I should probably get in here before we quit. Harold Schultz told a story about a kid who graduated from Bethel that didn't realize how to recognize the power. Sometimes you have to use different words with power than you do with common people. But recognize where you are and how you need to operate. That's all.
Well, thank you so much, Wen, for facilitating this conversation, and a special thank you to George for your reflections. Well, thank you, George, for leading a life of purpose and meaning and contribution as an example for all of us.